Tell Pat to drop 40 with a left hand and then we'll talk.
Larry Bird just fired back at Pat Beverly after Beverly disrespected his legacy in what might be one of the most outrageous takes in NBA history. In this video, we're breaking down everything, from Beverly's wild comments to the fiery reactions from fans and former players like Eddie Johnson and Jalen Rose. And if you think this is just another classic Pat Bev controversy, think again. Bird managed to shut down his entire argument, and maybe his career, with one brutal statement that it all went down in late August on the Pat Bev podcast, where Beverly was doing what he does best, running his mouth. The conversation turned into one of those endless NBA debates, Kevin Durant or Larry Bird, and that's when things took a turn.
Kevin Durant was playing when Larry Bird was playing, he would average 50.
Nobody was averaging 50.
Kevin Durant would have been.
Kevin Durant's one of my favorite players of all time, but I know.
Within minutes, the internet lost its mind. Fans went wild, and within hours, that clip was everywhere. Every comment section turned into a digital war zone. One side was armed with Kevin Durant's advanced stats and three-point numbers, while the other side fired back with Larry Bird's MVPs and those iconic 80s highlights where he torched entire teams. By the end of the weekend, it wasn't just a hot take anymore. It had turned into a full-on culture war. Old school versus new school. Grit versus skill. Trash talk versus Twitter talk. And sitting right in the middle of that chaos, Pat Beverly, a role player with a microphone who somehow managed to get the entire basketball world arguing about one of the greatest to ever do it. But before diving deeper into this Bird versus KD showdown, you've got to understand why Beverly's comments hit so differently. Pat Bev isn't an NBA legend. He's not even close. He's a guy known far more for his mouth than his scoring. A gritty guard out of Chicago, drafted in the second round in 2009, who had to take the long road just to make it to the league, playing in Ukraine, Greece, and Russia before finally breaking through with the Houston Rockets in 2013. From day one, his identity was obvious. He made a career out of annoying elite players. That was his thing. He hounded Russell Westbrook so relentlessly that Pat Bev defense practically became a meme. Over the years, he bounced from Houston to the Clippers, Timberwolves, Lakers, Bulls, and Sixers, and everywhere he went, you knew exactly what you were getting. A role player built to irritate. But here's the twist. That same attitude that made him a defensive pest on the court eventually became his whole brand off it. In 2022, he joined Barstool Sports and launched the Pat Bev podcast with Roan. And from that moment, it was clear, Pat Bev had found his second act. Unlike most ex-players who tone it down once they grab a mic, Beverly doubled down on his loud, unapologetic personality. That's why his voice gets more attention now than his box scores ever did. And let's be honest, this isn't new behavior for him. If you've followed Pat Bev long enough, you already know that controversy follows him like a shadow. Need proof? Remember when he made a list ranking the whitest black players in the NBA? Yeah, that one.
Jared Allen.
Why? Just because he likes anime?
I mean, okay.
Just because he has sweet sideburns?
You asked, you didn't make...
No!
Or when he straight up called Chris Paul a cone. Yeah, that's classic Pat Bev. No filter, no hesitation, just pure chaos.
Guard. He literally can't guard.
Chris Paul can't guard anybody?
No, he can't. Everyone knows that. What we call them? Cone. You know what you do with cones? You make a move. What does the cone do?
Stay still.
Exactly.
Within minutes, the internet exploded. Fans went absolutely wild, and before long, that clip was everywhere. Every comment section turned into a digital battlefield. One side dropping KD's advanced stats and shooting percentages, the other pulling out Bird's MVPs and those vintage 80s highlights where he torched entire teams. By the end of the weekend, it wasn't just a hot take anymore, it was a full-blown culture war. Old school versus new school. Grit versus skill. Trash talk versus Twitter talk. And right in the middle of that chaos stood Pat Beverly, a role player with a microphone who somehow managed to get the entire basketball world arguing about one of the greatest to ever play the game. But before we dive deeper into this Bird versus KD showdown, you have to understand why Beverly's comments hit so differently. Pat Bev isn't an NBA legend. He's not even close. He's a guy known far more for his mouth than for his game. A scrappy guard out of Chicago, a second-round pick in 2009, who had to take the long road to the league. He bounced from Ukraine to Greece to Russia before finally breaking through with the Houston Rockets in 2013. From day one, his identity was clear. He was the guy who got under people's skin. He hounded Russell Westbrook so relentlessly that Pat Bev defense became a meme. Over the years, he bounced from Houston to the Clippers, Timberwolves, Lakers, Bulls, and Sixers, and no matter where he went, you always knew what you were getting. A role player built to irritate. But that same edge that made him a defensive pest on the court eventually became his brand off the court. In 2022, he joined Barstool Sports and launched the Pat Bev podcast with Roan. From that moment, it was clear, Pat Bev had found his second act. Unlike most ex-players who mellow out behind the mic, Beverly doubled down on his chaotic energy. That's why his voice matters more than his box scores ever did. And this isn't new. If you've followed Pat Bev long enough, you know controversy follows him like a shadow. Remember when he called Chris Paul a cone? Yeah, that's classic Bev. Just loud and wrong every single time. In an era where ex-players are turning microphones into media empires, Pat Bev plays a very specific role, the disruptor. While guys like JJ Redick and Draymond Green use their platforms to educate fans, Beverly has built his on chaos, hot takes designed to piss people off. So when he said KD clears Bird, people didn't just hear a bad basketball opinion. They heard a professional instigator doing what he does best, stirring up debates for clicks, comments, and reaction videos. But this time he messed up, because he brought Larry Bird into it. And Larry Bird wasn't just another NBA legend, he was the monster other legends feared. When people talk about Bird, they don't just mention stats, they talk about moments. The kind that make you pause and say, there's no way that actually happened. Like the 1984 finals when he dragged the Celtics to a title. After Boston got embarrassed in Game 3, Bird called his teammates soft on live TV. Most players would lose the locker room after that. Bird came back averaging 28 and 14, dominated every possession, and won Finals MVP. Or the 1991 playoffs against Indiana, when Bird took a brutal fall, cracked his cheekbone, and left the game concussed. Everyone thought he was done. Then, out of nowhere, he walked back through the tunnel like it was a WWE entrance. The Garden went insane, and he led the Celtics to victory. And none of this makes sense until you remember where he came from, French Lick, Indiana. Population barely 2,000. No hype machine, no fancy AAU circuit, just a small-town kid who worked until he was better than everyone else. At Indiana State, he turned a no-name program into a national sensation, taking them all the way to the 1979 title game. That's where the legendary Bird versus Magic rivalry began. Magic won that night, but Bird walked away with something more permanent: respect. When Bird got drafted by Boston, the Celtics were a disaster. 29 wins, no direction, no identity. Then he showed up and everything flipped overnight. They jumped to 61 wins in his rookie year. And anyone who understands basketball knows, that kind of turnaround doesn't happen by luck. From there, the 80s became Bird's playground. 3 championships, 1981, 1984, 1986. 3 straight MVPs, 12 All-Star selections. But what truly defined him wasn't the trophies, it was how he played. Bird treated basketball like chess. He didn't rely on athleticism, he relied on IQ. He read the floor like a book, predicted movement, punished mistakes before they happened. He passed like a point guard, shot like a machine, and carried himself like he already knew how the game would end. Teammates said he'd literally tell them where to stand, deliver a perfect pass, and if they missed the shot, he'd roast them right there on the court. By the time he retired in 1992, he'd done it all: championships, MVPs, respect, and a legacy that still shapes the league today. And about that one statement Bird made about his left hand? Yeah, that's where things get even crazier.
Bird shoot left-handed for an entire game against Portland?
Right, 47 points. You're especially using your left hand.
Wow.
That wasn't some made-up flex, it actually happened. And it's one of the craziest stories in NBA history. Back in 1986, Larry Bird faced the Portland Trail Blazers and decided he was going to play the entire game using only his left hand. And no, it wasn't because of an injury. In Bird's own words, he was saving my right hand for the Lakers. That night, he dropped 47 points, 14 rebounds, and 11 assists, a triple-double, while using his offhand for most of the game. Just imagine that today, an NBA player intentionally playing with their weaker hand, not in practice or preseason but in a real game. It would break the internet. But Bird did it like it was just another Tuesday, and then followed it up by beating the Lakers a few days later. That's why Pat Bev's take stung so much. When you say something like, Kevin Durant clears Larry Bird, you're not just giving an opinion, you're ignoring the fact that Bird dropped 47 with his weak hand. Now, don't get it twisted, Durant is incredible. By 21 he was leading the league in scoring. By 28 he had 2 Finals MVPs and a reputation as the most unguardable scorer of his generation. But the key phrase there is his generation. Because Bird was doing things that broke basketball logic. Long before social media, advanced analytics, or modern training even existed, that's why fans brought back the left-hand story after Beverly's take. It wasn't nostalgia, it was evidence. Proof that Bird didn't need an era to make him great. The era needed him to evolve. So when Pat Bev says KD would have dominated the 1980s, the real question becomes, could KD have done what Bird did in that environment? Because here's the truth, Durant's greatness has always existed in controlled environments. Oklahoma City was his lab, Golden State was his cheat code, Brooklyn was his science experiment gone wrong, and Phoenix? That felt like an unfinished demo. KD has always thrived in systems built for him, not in teams he had to build himself. When Bird arrived in Boston in 1979, the Celtics were broken. 29 wins, no direction, no soul. Bird didn't join greatness, he created it. KD meanwhile joined it, twice. Durant benefits from a modern game built for scorers. No hand-checking, no clothesline fouls, no Bill Laimbeer waiting to knock your head off for driving the lane. He's a master of the modern game. But the modern game is a safe sandbox compared to Bird's world. Bird's era tested your will before your jumper. KD's era tests your Wi-Fi connection before the shot clock. And mentality-wise? They couldn't be further apart. Bird didn't just want to win, he wanted to destroy you. He'd humiliate you, call your plays out mid-possession, and talk trash while backing it up in real time. So don't get it twisted. Durant is one of the best of this era, no question. But Bird's presence was foundational. One reshaped basketball, the other mastered a modern version of it. Saying KD clears Bird is like comparing an iPhone to the guy who invented electricity. And that's what Pat Bev never understood. Bird wasn't just physically gifted, he was mentally dangerous. Every Larry Bird story sounds exaggerated until you realize they all come from people who actually faced him, and every single one tells the same story. He knew what you were going to do before you did. Take Reggie Miller, for example. During his rookie season, he made the mistake of trying to talk trash to Bird. Bird looked at him like he'd just broken an ancient code. Then he told Reggie, "You're the rookie. You don't even deserve to talk to me yet."
87% and 6th in the league right now.
Bird proceeded to score effortlessly for the rest of the quarter, barely breaking a sweat, before turning back to Reggie and saying, "Come talk to me when you've earned it." Lesson delivered. Then there's Shawn Kemp, the young high-flying phenom who thought he could intimidate anybody. But Bird wasn't anybody. He was the kind of player who took challenges personally. During one matchup, Bird went straight at Kemp like a chess master toying with a rookie. He baited him into fakes, beat him on positioning alone, and grabbed rebounds simply by being one step ahead. Kemp had the athleticism, sure, but Bird had the mind. And as the game went on, he quietly dismantled him, bucket after bucket, without ever breaking his expression. No chest pounding, no flexing. Just pure, calculated dominance. Because that's who Larry Bird was, not the loudest guy on the court, but always the one in control of it.
And gamesmanship and talking a little bit. Just try to ice the shooter a little bit. You know, I did that once, and then I kind of did it again, right? So he gets the ball from the official dribblers once. He's like, "Reggie, are you freaking kidding me? Reggie, are you freaking kidding me? I'm the best shooter this game has ever seen. You think you're gonna be able to ice me?" As he's talking. Next one, wah! Damn. I walked to the other side, and Kevin McHale goes, "Yeah, that was kind of stupid of you to do something like."
And then there's that legendary three-point contest moment, when Bird walked in and said, "Who's coming in second?" And then won it without even taking off his warm-up.
He just shook his head at me. He said, "Man, it's gonna be a fucked up night for you."
So what did he put up?
I think he gave me, I think he gave me 40, 46.
It's been told 100 times, but it never gets old, because of what it says about who Larry Bird really was. Before the three-point contest, Bird walked into the locker room, looked around at every other shooter and said, "So, who's finishing second today?" He wasn't joking. He'd already decided how it was going to end. Then he went out there, hit every shot he needed, and on the final rack, raised his finger in the air before the last ball even dropped. Swish. Game over. Tell me what else can top that. That moment defined him. What made Bird terrifying wasn't just his talent. It was the way he could predict his success in real time, and then go out and make it happen. Even Magic Johnson, his biggest rival, said Bird's greatest weapon wasn't his jumper, it was his mind. Magic used to joke that Bird could trash talk you and coach your defensive rotation at the same time.
In a second, let's take the picture.
Where'd you place?
He beat me that day.
Bird didn't just talk to his opponents, he talked to everyone. Coaches, benches, fans, even broadcasters. That's where Pat Bev's comparison completely falls apart. Beverly talks for attention. Bird talked for control. One was podcasting. The other was programming. Even today's stars recognize that psychological edge. Paul George once told a story of Bird, retired, wearing slacks, casually walking into a gym and draining a three-pointer like it was nothing. Bird's game was ahead of its time. His jumper? High release, unblockable. His footwork? Perfectly squared, balanced, even on a fade. And his passing, that's what separated him. Bird saw the floor like a chessboard. While others reacted, he anticipated. He knew when to cut, when to slip a screen, and the exact second to pull up. He didn't just beat defenders, he played them. Made them think they had him figured out, then embarrassed them the next possession. His trash talk wasn't ego, it was strategy. He'd call his shots, hit them, and remind you until you broke. Every generation has legends, but Bird's aura never faded. Ask Jordan, LeBron, or Pierce. They all speak about him with the same mix of fear and respect. And the craziest part? He did it all with a body that looked more like a math teacher than a modern athlete. Because Bird's weapon wasn't speed or strength. It was his mind. And if you think it was just mental, you're missing half the story. The 1980s NBA was a battlefield, physical, brutal, and unforgiving. Hand-checking was legal, defenders could literally push you off your line, and illegal defense rules forced one-on-one matchups. Every drive came with a bruise. Every mistake hurt. Bird thrived in that chaos. He didn't need elite athleticism. He had IQ, anticipation, and composure. Fast forward to today. KD, Steph, LeBron, incredible talents, but they play in a game engineered for efficiency. Defensive 3 seconds, no hand-checking, wide-open spacing. The floor's cleaner, the contact's lighter, and deep threes can win games without ever entering the paint. Not to say modern players aren't great, but the battlefield has changed. Back then, the NBA wasn't viral. It was local. Boston fans lived and breathed Bird. Detroit fans embodied toughness. Rivalries were raw and regional, not hashtags or highlight edits. Now, it's brands, movement, and marketability. The grit, loyalty, and hate that built the league have faded, and the preparation? Night and day. In the 80s, conditioning meant lifting, running, and eating whatever the team served. Recovery was an ice bath if you were lucky. Bird dominated through that. Today's players have private trainers, nutritionists, sleep tech, cryo chambers, and analytics teams. It's basically NASA basketball. So yeah, KD's great, but he's not facing 1980s defense, bruising hand checkers, or rulebooks designed to wear you down. Bird had none of that, no spacing, no modern tech, no shortcuts. And if you think he let the disrespect slide, think again.
Boy, he can play, man. He turned it out.
Yeah, he wasn't bluffing. That wasn't ego. That was dominance. Classic Bird. And let's be honest, Pat Bev's perspective comes with a little bitterness. He was never a superstar. He was a role player, a pest, the guy who made life miserable for stars. But he never was the star. No MVPs, no finals runs, no era defined by his name. Now he's on his podcast saying wild stuff, KD over Bird, picking fights with legends, just to stay relevant. It's the modern NBA podcaster trap. Bev's smart enough to know how the algorithm works. Hot takes get clicks. KD versus Bird, LeBron versus MJ, it's engagement bait, plain and simple. But here's the truth, clicks don't equal credibility. Beverly gets attention not because he's right, but because he's loud. We've seen it before. Austin Rivers, Kendrick Perkins. Role players using mics to build a spotlight bigger than their stat sheets ever did. And that's fine, but it's not the same as legacy. Bird didn't need a mic to command attention. He earned it, with fear, with respect, and with results. Beverly, meanwhile, only gets heard because of controversy. The irony's almost funny, calling out Larry Bird, one of the most feared competitors in NBA history, while never having carried a team, defined an era, or been the guy everyone game planned for. So next time a role player turned podcaster drops a hot take, remember this. Talking for a living only matters when your game has already done all the talking. And of course the old school guys weren't having it. Eddie Johnson fired back. You have zero clue how good Larry Bird was. Jalen Rose backed it up on ESPN, saying, I'm going with Larry legend at this point in their careers. He also reminded fans of something no one forgets. Durant's move to the 73-9 Warriors still haunts his legacy. Here's the takeaway. Larry Bird wasn't just a player. He was a mind, a leader, a strategist. He didn't chase validation, he created it. Pat Bev might talk for clicks. KD might dominate in stats. But Bird's influence? That's timeless. Bird's era demanded toughness, proof, and respect. Not sound bites. That's why debates like KD clears Bird might sound fun online. but they fall apart the second you actually understand basketball. That if you enjoyed this breakdown, hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives into NBA stories, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Who, if anyone, could really match Bird in his prime? Aside from MJ, of course.